New England is home to some of the most iconic hunting, fishing, and conservation opportunities in the world. Striped bass, whitetails in the big woods and suburbs, native brook trout, Maine moose, and the list goes on. Alongside these opportunities is a world-class, local-driven outdoor industry that is honed into the unique needs of New England hunting and angling. The Hunt Fish New England podcast brings you the men, women, and lore behind this region's incredible outdoor industry. This is hunting, this is fishing, this is New England. All right, everyone, welcome to the Hunt Fish New England podcast. This is Matt, and I'm here with Steve, the owner and operator of Unique Lures.
Hey, Matt, how you doing tonight?
Good, good. Steve, how do we say your name correctly, your last name?
Election.
Election. All right. I bluffed there. I was like, oh, I knew it. Then I got nervous.
Not election.
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 Cool. So if anybody buys a crankbait from you, the autograph on the side, that is
Correct.
Steve Election.
Correct.
Cool. All right. So if people don't know, Steve's got a company. They make Unique Lures. You know, that's their name, and the lures themselves are very unique, and made right here in Maine. So
Yep, I handcraft everything here, so it's definitely unique from most stuff you're going to find in the stores.
Steve and I, we met through, I think it was social media, believe it or not. Probably through some hashtag Maine something or other.
Something through, I think it was Instagram originally, yeah.
Yep, and then we met up right 2020. You took me out in the Penobscot.
Right.
And that was a phenomenal day. We caught a lot of smallmouth, and I think I caught this like chub.
You caught a chub, you caught a yellow perch,
Yeah,
bunch of smallmouth.
Yeah, and that was a cool day because we were on your boat. You had the Hemi at that time.
Right.
And we were using only Unique Lures.
Right.
It was just an amazing day.
Yeah, we tried the Moosehead Menace,
Yep.
the inline spinner, and your favorite lemon meringue crankbait.
Yep.
Square bill crankbait. Yep.
So it was a great day on the water. So this was, Steve and I are here. We're plotting for future trips. We already got a couple things in the books.
Springtime.
For sure. So what we want to get out of this episode is we want to learn more about Unique Lures, kind of get to know how you ended up making lures in the first place, and how people can find it, and things like that. So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit, how did you get started making lures in the first place?
Well, kind of by accident. I started hand carving fishing lures. My dad carved different figurines and things just as a hobby. And I thought I could try and do some wood carving. I took a pocket knife and carved it was just actually a 2x4. And I carved my first wooden lure out of that back in 2003. And then from there, I just started doing more carving, perfecting it a little bit. And then I started branching out into doing things that I could do a little bit quicker and produce more quantities of, where I started doing the jigs and the jig spinners, the inline spinners. I do the top water baits. I've got buzz baits. I've got the crank baits now, and just kind of grew the business from that. And
you started making like some copper, like spoons,
yes.
Right?
Yep. That's something that I've gotten away from. I'd like to get back to doing it, but again, they do take more time. They're forged out of just a piece of copper pipe. I cut the pipe to the size that I want, and I make my blanks. Then I shape it, hammer it out, polish it, paint it, put the hardware on it, and it's labor intensive.
I totally forgot to bring something up. How did today's show go?
It was okay. There were a couple other shows in the area. There was a gun show up in this area. There's a few other activities going on that people were going to see, and the foot traffic was fairly light, but it wasn't a bad show.
Okay.
And I think it was also that everybody's been canceling shows so far.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to do the Sportsman show at the University of Maine in March, and they canceled that show.
Did they say why?
COVID. COVID regulations, and
I see.
They wanted people to have vaccinations or proof of vaccination, tests 72 hours before the show, and there just wasn't enough vendor interest because of the restrictions.
Wow, that's a shame.
So they ended up canceling, and I think a lot of people probably thought that this show got canceled as well.
Mm-hmm.
So tomorrow's another day. Hopefully we'll have a little more foot traffic Sunday.
Great. And so for sales, you do some wholesale to different stores and whatnot, but you also have the site online, correct?
Right. Yep. I do. I have my lures are in stores in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine. And I have my website, which is uniquelures.square.site. Put HTTPS in front of it.
Yeah.
So that's where you can find them online. I have shows that I do. I do events for sportsman shows. I also do craft shows around the holidays. Usually I'm busiest between November or October sometimes, but usually November through February.
Mm-hmm.
We did the sportsman show a couple of years ago, which is typically held in March, but they've called that off the past few years due to COVID.
Yep.
Then the summertime, I don't do a lot of shows. I do a lot of fishing.
As it should be.
Right. I'm making lures and testing, and I take that opportunity to test my new designs.
Right, which is what, when we went on the Penobscot, you had a couple new ones that you were testing out.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that up front too. As we go talking about things, people are going to be interested and want to see lures.
Yeah.
So that the website that Steve mentioned is a good spot. Also on Instagram,
Facebook.
At Unique Lures.
At Unique Lures,
Yep.
yes.
So the first lure that I bought from you that kind of got me hooked was one of your...
Pun intended.
I can't say it was, but it was an inline spinner. So first of all, you mentioned you make a host of lures. Let's start with the inline spinners.
Okay.
I mentioned the one that got me very interested in your products because it worked like instantly, and then you can maybe share some other ones.
Sure.
So the one that I prefer, and it works everywhere. It works really well for me down in Mass in some of the stained water lakes. I don't know if it's because of the color or what, but it's an inline spinner. It's called the Moosehead Menace.
Right.
Tell us about the Moosehead.
Well, Moosehead Menace is named after Moosehead Lake. It was designed as a lure to catch brook trout, and it's purple and green are the primary colors of it. It's got a copper hammered blade on it, which I find is a good blade for light refraction and getting that flash in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big bait. Like I said, it was designed to catch trout. It's got a size 10 hook on it, which is not what you would typically use on a bass.
Right.
But I like to use it for smallmouth bass.
In the smallmouth, love them.
They do.
So it's a size 10 treble.
Yes.
And you have other larger, on the other end, you have the HD, is it HD inline spinner?
Right. The HDs are the heavy duty.
Now, what fishermen out there might want the HD?
Pike fishermen, pike and muskie.
Yeah. Tell us about those.
So those have, I don't have a standard on them, but the bigger ones are a size 12 blade. They're pretty rugged. The wire is a lot heftier than what I use on most of my inline spinners because of pike being a bigger fish and a little more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I use a 1/0 hook on it, and the hooks are dressed with bucktail and some crystal flash and other materials. So it adds a little bit of size, mass to the hook, and it makes the bait look bigger.
And then the one that I got, it's to me it kind of resembles like a small rainbow trout.
Yep.
It's like it has pink, some blue in it, if I remember correctly.
The Magenta Madness is the one I think that you've got.
Yeah, so the names are great, which I think makes it even better for people who want to buy something. They're kind of like, oh, that if any of these has to be Magenta Madness or Moosehead Menace, like this is the one. So, and how large are the HDs, lengthwise?
They're, with the dressing on the hook, they run about 6.5 inches.
I was throwing one down in Mass in a lake to be undisclosed, and you can cover a lot of water with it.
It's heavy.
It's heavy. You can chuck it. I was using an inshore rod actually, and It was perfect. I threw that with braid, pickerel. We're just loving it. That was the bigger predator fish that I was targeting. And so I think for anybody trying to hit pike with it, I'm going to try this year in Belgrade with it.
You definitely want to use a heavy duty or a medium heavy action rod because it's a big bait. it's going to get big fish, and you don't want to be fishing a light action rod. It'll be too heavy for the rod tip.
And I think anybody who fishes muskie or large pike anywhere in the country is going to want one of these.
Thank you.
The HD inlines. So the magenta madness, and there's another color that has some green in it, I believe.
Yep, I've got the golden frog. That
Yep.
one. That one's got it's a golden fluted blade, and that one's dressed with green bucktail. That's another nice color for stained water. It's, I guess, supposed to resemble kind of a frog. It's a frog pattern, but the color of it.
And so everything you make is handmade here.
Right.
And that's also going to include some of your other baits. Tell us about some other reaction baits you have.
So I have a cork lure. It's made of wine cork. It's a topwater popper. And it's got a solid core so that the hooks don't rip out, because cork would be soft and it would not hold the hook. But there's a solid core, and then it's painted. It's got a little propeller blade on it, so it makes a little splash, a little commotion. It's more of a chugger kind of a bait, like a hula popper. So you cast it, let it sit for a minute, and then just twitch your rod, pop it. It makes a ka-thunk sound in the water. And that's a pretty good bait for any kind of bass, large or smallmouth bass. I've also got a buzz bait, which is, I have a unique design in that my buzz bait is a jointed bait. It's not a solid wire shaft like typical buzz baits are. I feel that it's a better bait for two reasons. One, it has a treble hook where most buzz baits are a single hook, but it also has that articulated body.
Right.
So when the fish is trying to break free, it doesn't get leverage to rip the hook out of its mouth. Kind of goes limp.
And that's another bait that it's heavy but not too heavy.
Right.
So it's another one. It's a really good search bait, I think, especially when the top water bites on.
You can cast it a long ways and then just rip it back quick across the surface.
Yeah. So we covered inlines, large and small.
Yep.
A little bit of top water stuff. What about jig spinners?
I've got a big variety of jig spinners. I've got 1/8 ounce, which I prefer to use. I like the smaller baits. I like spinning rods. I like a light action rod. So I throw the 1/8 ounce a lot. I also have a 1/4 ounce, and I do up to a 3/8 ounce with a large, usually a Colorado blade on it.
Yep.
Some of my inline, actually the inline spinners and the jig spinners use similar blades. I have the Colorados, and I like the willow leaf blade a lot, which I use on a variety of my jig spinners too.
Yep, hammered and smooth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, I've got some painted ones. I've got some smooth nickel. I've got hammered copper. There's a variety of sizes, shapes, colors.
You were using one when we went out. It was like orange.
Yep, my Crazy Craw.
Cool. Tell us about that one.
So I call it the Crazy Craw. It's colored to be like a crawfish color. It's got an amber bucktail with a little bit of, it's funny because it's green, but it's just a shiny crystal flash to give it some light refraction. That's got a hammered copper blade on it, and that's a 1/4 ounce head, and it's a bright orange. And I call it the Crazy Craw because it's bright orange with the amber and the black. And it looks like a crawfish in the water.
For sure. It also, I think, would work well anywhere there's like pumpkin seeds.
Yep.
I think it kind of mimics that too.
Yep.
If it was like a post pumpkin seed spawn, and some of the smaller ones were out and about, I think that would be a really good bait for that.
It works on stripers too.
Really?
Yes.
So the hardware holds up to it.
It certainly does.
So a jig spinner compared to what spinner you'd see, like let's say like a contemporary bass spinner.
Okay.
How does the jig spinner look different? Just so anybody listening in is like, what the heck's a jig spinner? Because it is kind of like a classic spinner type bait.
Right. So typically what you're going to find in the stores from some of the bigger manufacturers like Booyah or baits like that, it's going to have a silicone skirt on a rubber skirt. It's a fixed wire bent in the shape of like a triangle with a head on it, and then you tie your bait on if you want to put a trailer like a pork rind or something like that onto it, and it has a very large blade. And they're pretty heavy. Mine, like I said, are 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce. The 3/8 ounce is not my preferred one. It's pretty heavy, but if you're fishing deep water, it's good.
Yeah.
But I tie bucktail, marabou, and I use crystal flash on my baits. Gives it a little different presentation in the water. It gives you different colors. So I think that it works a little better than the silicone skirts.
I think they're more approachable too. Like if you're looking to like have a constant bite, because I feel like some of the spinner baits, like you said, the mass-produced ones, they're huge.
Right.
I personally like to throw smaller baits. Like I'm more of like a finesse guy.
Me too.
Not that these are like super small. I don't want to give the false illusion of that. But like for example, some guys might be throwing like a 7-inch rubber worm in the same boat as me. I'd rather throw a 3-inch Ned
Right.
rig if I can get away with it. I feel the same way for spinners. I haven't had great luck with, those large mass-produced type spinners. These small jig spinners,
They get more bites.
They get way more bites.
Yep.
And it's like a classic bait. It's just interesting that, most people want to throw these huge things now versus some of
They
these
see
more classic small baits.
They see it on TV. They
Yeah.
see, the Bass Pros throwing these things or talking about these baits.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say they don't work, but and people also say the bigger bait, the bigger fish.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the case. Sometimes, especially in pressured waters, when you throw a finesse worm, same with throwing an 1/8-ounce jig, it's a smaller presentation. It's less abrupt when it hits the water, and I think you do get more strikes. I do. I get more strikes.
I've had the same experience, which was, again, one of the main reasons when I had that Moosehead Menace. I know we're talking about jig spinners now. Moosehead's the inline
smaller
spinner. It's like a
though.
3-inch, I think,
Yeah.
about. I threw that thing almost all day when we were out on the Penobscot, and I don't think I went 10 minutes without getting a hit.
Right.
Whereas if I was going to be throwing those larger spinners, trying to target smallies, I don't think I probably would have hit anything that day.
Right. A lot of times you throw a big bait, you'll scare the fish away, and unless you have a fish that's real aggressive and protective of a nest or something like that, they'll not bite a big bait. But you throw a small bait that doesn't cause a lot of commotion when it hits the water, let it sink down and start playing it in, get that action going,
Yeah.
they'll strike it.
For sure. And the other key feature of the jig spinner is there's a little bit more play between the hardware and then the head of the jig part of the bait.
Right, it's not fixed.
Right, so it's more articulated, and I think
Yep.
it just gives it that much more play, especially if you're going to maybe do a retrieve, like a slow retrieve, and jig it a little bit as you
Right,
bring
you
it
can
in.
play it in and
Yeah, just gives it
bounce it around a little bit off the brush or off the bottom. And
Yeah, just more play to it.
Yeah.
So it's a more classic-looking spinnerbait than you'll see mass-produced, but I think highly effective if you're somebody who wants to, be constantly catching stuff.
I find they work. Like I said, I fish the 1/8 ounce primarily.
Mm-hmm.
I do the 1/4 ounce a lot too, but the 1/8 ounce is my go-to. That size is just deadly. I feel it is. And it comes, the ones I have come in a variety of colors from, more natural colors to more off-the-wall, brighter, colors. And so you have a choice.
But another pun not intended. It's a unique presentation. Some of the colors you choose.
Yes.
There's definitely an imagination behind it, but it kind of sets you aside of other
Right.
lures that you'll see out there.
And that's one of the reasons I started Unique Lures. I was tired of going to Walmart or some of the big box stores and finding the same colors, the same stuff year after year. I was stocking my tackle box. I'd buy a lure come spring. After a while, it's like I don't have anything that appeals to me. There's just the same stuff I've been buying.
Sure.
And I wanted something different that I could throw. And so when I come up with a design, I try it. I bring it out on the water. I test it, make sure it's going to catch fish. And they don't always, the first time you try it, they don't always catch the fish. And then you tweak it. You put a bigger blade on it. You change the color, change the size, alter the presentation. And then you come up with a design that works. And that's how I've developed my product line.
Great. And they clearly work. Like I said, I went out with Mr. Unique Lures himself on his boat, on his water, and we only threw Unique Lures. And you can see the video is actually on the Hunt Fish New England YouTube page, and you'll see a picture of Steve there holding a nice smallie. So it's definitely worth a look. And we featured the inline spinner Moosehead Menace mostly, as well as the lemon meringue square bill.
Yep.
So let's get into square bills. Do you still have two different sizes? Is that how you're differentiating the line?
I have 3 square bills right now.
Let's start smallest and then work our way up.
So I have a 2.5. Well, I have a 2, 2.5, and a 3-inch.
And these are floating or suspended?
Floating.
Great.
All three are floating. The one of them, the first one I actually started making was the 2.5-inch square bill. That one, what's unique about that versus any other crankbait that I've seen on the market, I use a single style hook. It's not a treble hook. There's 2 hooks on it. There's one on the center of the bait and one to the back.
Yep.
But it's a single offset hook. And I'll tell you, I've only lost maybe 2 fish using that. I've lost more using a treble hook. And I think the reason is the hook that I use, it's a size 4, but like I said, it's an offset hook. So it turns when the fish strikes and it sticks in the side of their mouth. They don't get a chance to swallow it. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty aggressive hook. And I just prefer that for a bass because when you stick your thumb in its mouth, you don't want 2 sets of treble hooks bouncing around and
Sure.
shaking their head. But that is my preferred type of hook on the crankbaits that I make on that 2.5.
Yep.
I have a 2-inch, which is the lemon meringue.
Yep.
That's the size on that. That does have a treble hook. And the only reason I put treble hooks on that is because it's traditional. A lot of people like a treble hook for a bass lure.
Yep.
And it's not a very large hook. It's a size 8, which works well for the size of the lure. And again, there are 2 treble hooks on it. But it does make a good presentation.
Definitely.
For the fish.
And unlike some other crankbaits or square bills, whatever, that you might buy, from another company, typically other companies are going to put, cheaper terminal tackle on.
Right.
You don't take that shortcut. You put quality hooks on.
Right.
Usually I replace, if anything else I buy, I'll replace them. I'll buy whatever brand is hot or that I've gotten used to using. I'll replace them. I'm good to go because I was doing tournaments for a while.
Right.
But I never have replaced any of the trebles that you put on.
Well, it's good to hear.
I did the one. I think it was a 2.5 that I did.
You put trebles on.
I put trebles on that just for my own, my own habit and
Yeah.
peace of mind.
Well, I hear that a lot
Yeah.
from people. They're like, I'm going to put treble hooks on it. I tell them try it with the single hook, and
yeah.
like I said, it's an aggressive hook and it works. And I've had people that tried it and love it.
And it makes sense though if you think about it. Like striper guys, if they're throwing stuff topwater, most of those are single hooks anyways. Mm-hmm. Part of that's law now, but either way, it's still effective.
You got to get a good hook set, but I feel that the treble hooks. Another disadvantage to a treble hook is you pick up a lot of weeds, and you get a lot
Good
of
point.
Structure you catch.
Yeah.
With a single hook, it bounces off a lot more stuff. So you have a square bill, which is going to bounce off the stumps and the branches and things. Plus, you have a single hook versus a treble. You don't get hung up in all the debris.
So we covered the 2, the 2.5. What else you have?
So the 3-inch, which has a size 4 hook on it, and that's a treble hook. That's a pretty chunky crankbait. And I like to throw that, but again, that's a heavy rod. It's going to cast a ways. I like that 2-inch on a light action rod.
Yeah, same. Like a medium.
But if you go to a medium heavy, you can throw that 3-inch all day long.
So let's go back to the unique part of these. Let's go to the 2-inch. Tell us about some of the specific colors and names.
Okay.
And, kind of paint the picture for the listener.
So the one we were talking about earlier is the lemon meringue, and picture in your head looks like a lemon meringue pie. It's got yellow on the bottom, and it's got that nice white meringue on the top, which is unique in that a lot of baits have the white on the bottom, and they have the brighter color on the top. So I reversed it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite colors to use on the crankbaits. I've also got one called Blueberry Shad, which is silver and blue. It works. I've caught a number of largemouth bass on it, and it's interesting because in nature, there aren't really any blue fish.
Yeah, at least not up here.
So it's not something that represents natural forage.
Yep.
But the action of the lure, and I think the silver, because the silver's on the back, on the top of it, it kind of represents a minnow. And then on the side, it's got the blue, and it's got some sparkle in it, so it reflects the light and stuff, and it just gives that good presentation.
So it's going to imitate like a shad or a
Yeah,
shiner, something
right,
like that.
Right. Then I've got another one that's kind of a wild color. It started out as sort of a rainbow trout pattern. If you Google rainbow trout lures, you'll see similar patterns. It's green and pink, and the pink works really well for lures, both for bass and salmon. Mine, I call it the watermelon slice because it's green and pink and it has black dots.
Yeah.
So it looks like a slice of watermelon. And that's another favorite of mine. I did a trip with my daughter up on the Penobscot over the summer. I had 3 casts in a row. I caught a fish over 2 pounds, smallmouth.
Phenomenal.
Just take one off the hook, cast it back out there, got another one. And I fished that lure for quite a bit that day and caught quite a few smallmouth bass on it. Again, it's a pretty wild looking color, but it works.
So everyone knows, these are silent. The 2 inches are silent.
Correct.
Which I like the silent part for those smaller, like search type baits. So like when I was doing tournaments, everyone's throwing the newest thing with all sorts of different beads in it and whatever. But they're all throwing the same thing if you think about it. Everyone knows what just came out from these big producers. Everything's got sound to it and different.
You've got to be unique.
Sometimes you do. So I really liked the lemon meringue for like that pre and post spawn time when you know the bass are still kind of up shallow and whatever's not guarding nests or whatever is trying to feed up, whether it's pre or post spawn. I just thought it was a really good chuck and wind, and it was silent. And like you mentioned, you have the variety of colors.
Right.
So you just gear it towards whatever the fare is. I always like the lemon meringue because it's bright. I can see it. If I'm in stained water, I think it gives like more of like that kind of perchy type of presentation.
Yeah.
So I'm biased towards that one big time. But I do like the other colors. The blue one I think is a great anywhere there's shiners or maybe even smelt. Right. And then
it's going to imitate something like a shiner.
Yeah. And then if you just got to throw something more wild, go with what was it? Watermelon slice.
Watermelon slice.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's move up to the 2.5s. I should probably ask this question first. Do you have different colors for different sizes?
Yes.
Okay, talk to me about the 2.5s.
So the 2.5, that was the original size that I started making, which is the one that has the single hook design. I still like that one. I think of the 3, that's probably my favorite size, and I like the single hook. Mm-hmm. And that one, I've got quite a few colors in it. I came up with a couple of new colors for 2022. I have one that's black. It's called the, what is it called? Well, we'll get back to that. It's black with green speckled, sparkles on the back of it.
Yeah.
And it's a very dark colored bait. Emerald Bandit. Sorry, that's it's called the Emerald Bandit. I was trying to remember what
it's so new. Even the maker doesn't know what it is.
It's new. And that one it's been pretty popular since I've introduced it into my line. And I'm anxious to fish it more this spring and get it out there in the water. I think it's going to be a great dark water, stained water bait. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it's black, but it has that green sparkle to it, so it's going to reflect some light.
What's that one called again?
Emerald Bandit.
Emerald Bandit.
Yeah,
cool.
Emerald because it's got the green and it's green and black.
So it's kind of perchy.
Yeah, more like a white perch.
Cool.
I would say.
Okay.
Because of the darker color of it. One of my favorite ones is called Plum Crazy Craw. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not.
That was one of the first ones I designed, and that one's a bright orange belly with a purple top or back on it.
Sure.
And then it's got some glitter in it to give it some sparkle. Then it has little painted on tentacles or legs like a crawfish would have.
Sure.
I use that one quite a bit, and it's been a pretty popular bait since it came out. Like I said, it was one of the first ones I did. Again, being the bright orange color, it's more of an eye-catching bait than it is a realistic looking bait.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've seen crawfish throughout the season, they change colors, and there's no crawfish that's really the color of this lure, because there's no purple crawfish. But this in stained water, the purple almost looks kind of green, almost like a motor oil kind of a color to it.
Oh, great.
So it has similar coloring of a natural forage type bait.
Okay. And let's move up to the threes.
The threes, I've got two colors right now. I've got the pumpkin patch, which is orange and green. The other one I have is the bleeding bass, which it looks like a largemouth bass coloring wise, and it has a spray of red on the gills, looking like an injured fish. And these are all available on my website as well. You can go to the website and see pictures of these lures.
The bleeding bass is my favorite of the threes.
That's your favorite?
That's my favorite of the threes because it, like you mentioned, it's got a white belly, right?
Right, yep.
It's got kind of like the black kind of
black back and green on the side.
Right. So it looks like a bass, but then it's cool. It's like this splatter, this like red splatter on it. And you have, is it red hooks on it, if I remember correctly?
Red hooks on it. Yep.
And just kind of picture a slow, and not in a bad way, like kind of a slower wobble because it's a 3-inch. It's a bigger body.
Right.
It's got a nice slow wobble, but these ones have a rattle.
Yep.
This is an awesome, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. It's when, in my opinion, if the bite isn't super hot and you throw this, it's a great search bait because you can chuck and wind, you can throw it far, but it's not super intimidating. It looks wounded.
Right.
Which is perfect for the color presentation and everything.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorites.
Thank you for that. That's what I was kind of going for, was the wounded fish look to it. But with that red, it's only on one side of the bait. So when it has that wobbling action, it's kind of red goes away and then comes back. Red goes away, red comes back as it wobbles side to side.
And one thing I like that because they're all floating. This one's also floating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you chuck it, maybe dirt shallow, you bring it in, you hit some type of debris, just stop.
Right, let it float up.
Floats up, and you're back. And a lot of times I'm either hitting them as it floats up, or after I hit it and I start to retrieve again.
Right, do a quick kind of a diving retrieve, then let it float up a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the 2.5s are great, you know, especially with the single hook, could be really good. Now that I'm just thinking out loud, like maybe like in the early fall when the weeds are starting to die down, but everything's going shallow again. Mm-hmm. You know, that would be a really good bait. Throw shallow and just rip through the weeds.
Right.
Because it's not going to get hung up. All right. I don't know why I didn't think of that when I was fishing it. Now, are you doing anything for ice fishermen?
Well, I have the jigs, which you can take, and that's another thing about my jig spinners is the wire apparatus that holds the blade to the head. You can take that off the head, and then you can fish the jig just as a jig head. So you can use that for ice fishing. You can do it with the blade on it as well, but if you want to just fish a jig, you know, down deep for togue, just take that apparatus off, tie directly to the jig, and drop that down. And that's where I have some different presentations. When I use the marabou or I use the crystal flash in it, it gets a little bit more movement as you're jigging it. So I have those. I've been toying with the idea of doing some either spoons or other kind of ice jigs. The thing with the spoons is I don't want to just buy a bunch of spoons, put a sticker on it, and call it a unique lure.
Yeah.
I can do the copper spoons that we talked of earlier, but they are labor intensive. I couldn't produce enough of them to meet demand, and they're kind of a, you know, personal type of a lure for me. If I make it, I usually just fish it.
I hear you.
But I've been toying with the idea. I don't know which way I want to go with the ice fishing yet.
Okay. So if somebody does buy like a jig spinner, they can just take off the blade,
right,
and fish that as
just a jig.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also do custom stuff. If somebody wants to try something in a color pattern that they think is going to work, or that they've used before that they like and can't find, I can do some custom designs too.
Let's go back to the inline spinners.
Okay.
When you're making an inline spinner, talk to somebody who's never made a lure before. talk about the wire, how you're, don't give away all your secrets, but what does it look like for you? Because this is all made here in Maine, at your workshop. Tell people when they buy your product, what does it look like when it's in raw material? And let's use the Moosehead Menace, for example.
Sure. It doesn't look like much in raw materials. It's just a piece of, we'll call it piano wire, basically. It's stainless steel wire, so it won't rust.
Yep.
It's also very durable. You've got to put an eye on it, so you have a place to tie it to. So you put an eyelet on one end of it, then you put your hardware on, and depending on the size of the bait or the presentation you're looking for, you choose different size blades, different color blades, different types of blades. Like I said earlier, I use Colorado blades, I use willow leaf blades, I have some Indiana blades, and they all perform a little different. If you want a blade that's going to spin quicker, you want to go with a willow leaf.
Right.
If you want a blade that's going to spin slower and at slower speeds, a Colorado blade is going to be what you want. It cups the water a little bit better, and you can move really slow and have it still spin. So they're held on with a clevis. You put the clevis on the wire, put your blade on, then you put your decorative beads on it. In the case of the Moosehead Menace, it's got some purple beads on it, different sizes. And what I find with the lure is the profile of the bait. You don't want to have something that's too gauby, with giant beads on it.
Right.
I like to taper it so it's narrow at the tip, gets fatter at the bottom, like most fish. And then I dress the hooks on some of them. Some of them I put a plain hook on it, but I'll dress it with bucktail, marabou, crystal flash, put some kind of maybe a piece of tubing on it, colored tubing, which on the Moosehead Menace is what it has, just a little piece of green tubing on the hook. And that purple and green combination is very effective.
It's deadly.
So
deadly.
That's sort of the process. It's just a matter of taking the components and putting it on that wire, and then you want the wire to be straight. You want your eyelets to be straight, and then it'll run true in the water.
And I've purchased several from you. We'll just stick with the Moosehead, and they all look the same. Your end product is consistent.
Thank you.
Despite being handmade, it's gonna. You have the system perfectly. So if somebody bought something and they get hung up and lose it, or what have you, if you rebuy, it's gonna be
the same thing you bought. And that's where the copper, the spoons are hard to reproduce to make it exact.
Yep.
I can make them similar in size. I can make the color patterns similar. It's just, it starts out with a raw piece of copper, and then you have to hand form it, sand it, polish it, shape it, all of that. So it's a little bit trickier, where these are, components that you start with and assemble a different design or whatever. And some of the lures are painted different colors and things like that.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about that next. So when you do the paint, you're putting the blanks on a vise and then going from there. What's your
not when I paint them? No.
Okay.
When I work on making them, they're usually either a hand tool or a wire bender to form them. When I paint, it's pretty rudimentary, I guess. I don't have a big spray booth. I don't have a big warehouse or big shop. So I usually use vice grips to hold the materials and spray it, and then I'll put a couple of coats on, put the primer down, put the top coat on, put a clear coat on. If I'm doing any kind of like stripes or dots or kind of sparkles and stuff like that, I add those as I go through the series of painting it. And it takes a little bit of time because you got to wait, between coats. You can't just spray it on thick and have it done. You've got to spray on a light coat, put another coat over that, make sure it's even.
Yep.
Sometimes sanding's required.
Yep.
And then smooth it out, put a clear coat on it, and finish it up.
And that process totally works. When we were on the Penobscot, we must have caught over 50 smallmouth that day. And
I watched the video recently. I forgot how many we caught, but it was quite a bit.
That was maybe a tenth of the footage,
Yeah. That was a fun day.
Great day, but the baits held up.
Yes.
No paint chipped. Everything looked great. It wasn't until I got on a pickerel that, like any other bait, it's going to have a scratch or something on it.
Teeth, right.
But the
finish holds up.
It looks great. And again, they all look uniform. I bought several of the lemon meringue. They all look the same. It's just another point. Some people think, I'd rather get it printed or whatever, or dipped, because they're all going to look the same. I know what to get. I think when you have somebody who's making quality stuff, it's also going to be uniform like yours.
I take pride in doing that, in making sure that it looks the way, that I want it to look, but it looks like the one before it, and the next one looks like the one before it. I don't have, some that are like, it looks okay.
Yeah.
And I've messed up some paint jobs in the past. And, I'd rather start again with a different one than put out a bad product.
Or just put it in your box.
No, I don't even put it in my box. It's got to be good to be in my box, too.
I gotcha. And then so like just on that same topic, the bleeding bass, it's the same thing,
Yeah.
It's all hand done. And I've gotten several of those and they all look the exact same. So
they're not always easy, especially when you're doing something like that where you've got one shot. You put your base coat on, and you put your black and you put your green on. Now you've got your nice white, black, and green, and you've got one shot to put that red on.
Yep.
And if you miss, it doesn't spray on right, or you screw it up. Now you're back to either trying to strip it down if you can, which sometimes works. Sometimes you ruin a whole bait. But after you've done it for a while, you get a little more adept at being able to spray it where you want it to be sprayed.
And all your crankbaits are signed.
Yes.
When I first started buying them, I thought everything was like dipped or something, because the signature looked the same, they all looked the same, but they're legitimately hand signed.
Yes.
Every single one.
Every single one.
If you look on the site or on Steve's Instagram, you'll see it. It's a nice touch. I personally, I think everything's a piece of art, and it's a really cool touch, and they all look the same. I still can't get over that.
It's a little more personal. It's Steve's autograph.
For sure. So if you buy a bait, you get the autograph of the artist as well. And then so if something has a bucktail on it or marabou, you're hand tying all of that as well.
Yeah.
So everything's handmade essentially.
Right.
Here in Maine, in the U.S.
Exactly. Here in the U.S.
And I feel like sometimes people who make stuff in the U.S., they jack the price up because, they're like, oh, it's my time, etc. I find your prices to be reasonable.
Thank you. I try. So our mission statement, when I started doing this, like I said, I was looking for something that was different, something unique. I didn't want to buy the same thing every year at the store unless I lost something and wanted an exact replacement. Mm-hmm. But so our mission statement is to make fishing lures that are enjoyable and affordable for everyone. So I don't want to jack the prices just because I'm making a handmade lure. Mm-hmm. It does take some time, but I don't think it warrants spending, $30 or $40 on a crankbait. So, you can spend on my baits, they're $7.50 on the crankbaits, and you can fish that all day long. It's going to hold up. If you lose it, you buy another one for $7.50. It's not going to break the bank.
Right.
So I want people to come back and buy my product because it works, because it looks good, and they can afford to.
Right. So. And the thing, too, like I mentioned earlier, the terminal tackle on them, it's quality. So if you're saying, $7.50, that's a lot. You don't have to replace anything on them. Right. You order from Steve. He's pretty fast for shipping. I was impressed with how quick. So from here, we're up by Bangor.
Right.
You ship to me down towards Boston, a couple days.
Yep.
There. So
I try to keep my inventory at a level that I can have inventory when you call for it. I don't necessarily make it the day of the order, so I can get it shipped out and get it to you within a couple of days.
So I ordered on like a Sunday night or something. I had things by Wednesday. I think I got home, it was on Wednesday, and I was ready for the next weekend. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
That made my week. I'm used to sometimes things coming in, a week, sometimes 10 days. So the shipping's super fast, and all the packaging is professional, and You also got stickers that make
Yep.
their way into some
Yep.
some packages.
I do put
others not.
some stickers in with my product. I like to have people, be able to show my logo off on their car or their tackle box or whatever. And
That's what I do.
yeah.
All right. Anything else we didn't cover that you want to cover?
No, I can't really think of anything. Like I said, it's more, the reason I started Unique Lures was for something different, something that was affordable for people, something that people can enjoy. I want people to enjoy the outdoors. I don't want them to feel guilty because they spent $30 on a fishing lure and then they don't want to fish it, or if they lose it, they're not going to buy another one, or they feel like they, have to sacrifice. I can't buy groceries because I want to go fishing. I want to have an affordable product, a quality product, a product made in the USA, something you can be proud of. And I do try and use the best components that I can to give you a product that's going to last and hold up. The hooks, you'll get dull points after a while, but out of the box, they're sticky as anything.
They're ready to go.
They're ready to go.
And talk real quick about custom orders, because I loved the Moosehead Menace, but for me it didn't work in a particular lake because in that lake the fish were very finicky. Mm-hmm. It was crystal clear water. I don't even know what the transparency was, but it was super clear, and they were only hitting smelt.
Yep.
And I loved the Moosehead Menace for its balance. I could throw it, on super light line.
But you want something with a silver blade.
I needed something with silver, but I also wanted it to be like more white and blue.
Right.
And you were like, I got this. Don't worry about it. Like, I know exactly what you're looking for. I got it. I did some ice out trolling with it. It was lights out. Talk to us, like, if somebody wants something custom, how do you suggest they contact you and describe what they want, and how does it end up back to them?
So you can message me on Facebook or Instagram. You can go to my website, https://uniquelures.square.site.
Yeah.
You can email me from that site and tell me what you want. You can email me. My email address is Unique Lures, just spell out Unique Lures 2018@gmail.com. And you can message me and say, I want a color pattern like this, or send me a photo of something. I don't know if you're familiar with the pearl spinners. It was popular, back 30, 40 years ago. They no longer make them, but I have a version of a pearl spinner, which is, a lot of people use it for tying a fly, run a leader off. It's a spinner. Mm-hmm. They tie a fly onto it, run it out 3-4 feet, whatever. So my version is a white Indiana blade, size 1, with a red dot on it, versus the original pearl spinner, which was more of a transparent blade. It was, I don't know what it was actually made. I don't know, it was like almost a plastic, but I don't know how to describe it.
Yep.
But it had a whitish color to it, almost opaque, but then it had a red dot. A lot of the old timers remember that lure and want something like that, so I came up with my version of the pearl spinner.
Cool.
So if you have an idea, just let me know what it is. We can talk about it today, actually, at the show. So I have a lure I call the Bass Banana. It's a chartreuse willow leaf blade, and it has different color yellow beads on it. It's got a chartreuse, and it's got an iridescent, like a transparent chartreuse bead on it. A little gold sticker, like an eye on the blade. Mm-hmm. The guy said, that's great, but I want yellow. He didn't want chartreuse, he wants yellow. So I said, that's fine. I can do a yellow blade. Just, we'll pick a color and I'll put something together for you. So that's where I come into play as a unique lure handcrafted manufacturer. You want something that you dream up, let me know what it is and we'll make it for you.
And Steve really does match exactly what you're looking for.
I do my best.
I have to say, when that showed up at my house, I was blown away. It was better than what I had imagined.
Great.
So, all right. You mentioned in the summer you're doing a lot of fishing, so not a lot of shows.
Field testing, I prefer to call it.
Field testing. Where can people see you next? Maybe in the next month or so.
Well, I was supposed to do, like I said, I was supposed to be up at the University of Maine for the Eastern Maine Sportsman Show. Unfortunately, they canceled the show, so I won't be there. Over the summer, I'm hoping that in June I'll be up in Milo doing the Black Fly Festival. I tried to do it last year and the year before, but again, COVID, they canceled the show. I don't know what's going to happen this year. I have not heard, but I hope to be there. There's the Whoopie Pie Festival up in Dover in June, which I may also participate in if they do that show. So there's a lot of things that are hanging in the balance right now.
Contingent on COVID stuff.
Yeah. We had quite a few shows this past, because I do, like I said, from November through February, I usually do a lot of shows, and I had at least 4 shows canceled on me, and one of them was last minute. It was supposed to be in December. I found out December 1st that they were canceling the show. So that's just the way it is. But hopefully this will be a better year.
Hopefully. I think it will be. And so people should go, at least at the very least, go on Instagram, type in @UniqueLures. You're the only one on there.
Yeah.
I believe.
I think I am.
Give a follow, and at least you can update people what the plan is.
Correct. I put on posts where I'm going to be fishing. I put on posts where I'm going to have shows. I put on posts of what new lures I've designed. I show pictures of the fish I've caught, the new designs. You know, I welcome comments if you want to ask questions on there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So at the very least, give Steve a follow, and uniquelures.square.site if you want to do an online order.
Right.
If people are interested in, maybe becoming pro staff, is that an option for you?
Yes. Well, that's how basically you and I hooked up.
Right.
You're part of my pro staff in that you've field tested some of the lures for me. As I come up with new designs. If you're part of the pro staff, what I like to do is give you a design to try, get your feedback, and then I can incorporate that if you say you need a bigger blade or you need a smaller presentation or different changes you might want to make for your preferences. I'll design something around that or make the modifications to my current lure. Not everything that I have is, the first time out works. It's something that I've done field testing on and tried it. So, sometimes people want a bigger hook. They're fishing a certain lure that I designed for trout. They want to use it for bass and want a bigger hook.
Yeah.
So I'll do 2 variations. I've got one I call Cyclops. I don't know if you've seen it on my website. You may not have. It's fairly new.
I haven't.
But it's the same lure. If you look at the photos, it's the exact same lure, but one has a treble hook, one has a single offset hook. And the reason for that is one you can use for bass, one you can use for trolling for salmon. So things like that, I'll do 2 variations of the same product, just change the hook or change the blade size.
And you have pro staff all around the country.
I've got a few, I've got one.
Well, it's not like one in every state.
Right.
But
Alaska.
Yep.
Alaska, Massachusetts, couple of guides in Maine. So I like to have a little, input from people that are using them. And I don't always fish the same waters that you guys are fishing.
Right.
So, to hear, I fished more of a glacial lake, clear water, deep, no weeds, stuff like that. This lure didn't work. But then I fished it on a dark, stream and running water and this and that, and it did work. So, okay, now I can, kind of fine tune my presentation of that lure.
Great. Steve, thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
Well, thank you for doing it with me.
It's your first podcast.
It is.
You're a natural.
Thanks.
So Steve and I, we plan to do another video, but please go on YouTube, check out the Hunt Fish New England channel, and you'll see Steve and I in action throwing some unique lures ourselves. And we're going to do something this year. So
definitely. Maybe more than one.
That would preferably. Really want to get into some pike or some large pickerel or something.
Yes.
But we'll be sure to share that stuff as those dates actually come to fruition and whatnot. So again, Steve Election, Unique Lures out of Maine. Everything is made here in the USA. Give him a follow at Unique Lures on Instagram, also on Facebook, and uniquelures.square.site for your online orders. Steve, thanks again. And
appreciate it, Matt.
Look forward to the getting out in the water with you this year.
Definitely.
All right, people, that's it for today. Thanks for listening.